Good evening. I'm Manny Flores, Alderman of the First Ward in the City of Chicago, and I want to welcome you to another segment of the First Ward Chronicles. In this evening's program, we're going to be talking about property taxes. As you know, we are approaching the fall season, and property taxes are going to be due soon in the City of Chicago. That being said, we have a tax system where every 3 years, the Cook County Assessor's Office conducts an assessment of the property, which will determine the property taxes for a 3-year period. So with us on the program to help us learn a little bit more about the assessment process, what does it mean, and how we can engage it, is Dana Marbury, who is the manager of the Community Outreach Program for the Office of the Cook County Assessor, Jim Houlihan. Mr. Marbury, welcome to the program. May I call you Dana?
That's fine.
Very good, Dana. Thank you so much for being on the program here this evening. As you know, and you've worked in the assessor's office for many years. Thank you for your public service. There's a lot of there are sometimes we sometimes have a little confusion between the role that the Cook County Treasurer's Office plays, and then the Cook County Assessor's Office, as how it impacts our property taxes. Dana, can you tell us a little bit about what your office does, and how it works in determining what the property taxes are going to be for the City of Chicago and Cook County?
Certainly, and thank you, Alderman Flores, for having me on. I'm happy to come out and talk about this whole process because, as you know, Assessor Houlihan has been in office since 1997, and it's been one of his main goals is to make sure that people understand this process, to make the process more transparent. And what you're mentioning is a main confusion for a lot of people. Number one, they think that the assessor's office is the one who sends out the tax bills and collects the tax dollars, and that's not so. That's the county treasurer's office that does that. What the assessor's office does is places value on properties for property tax purposes. So every 3 years, as you mentioned, we determine what the value is for 1.8 million parcels throughout Cook County. And then those taxes are assigned based on that value that we put on the properties.
And what is that? How is that determined in terms of why we even need to value the property every 3 years? What is that based on? And then let's talk a little bit about then how that impacts our taxes, and how that impacts also the way that the property tax dollars then are distributed among the various agencies that collect revenue from the property taxes.
Okay, well, to begin with, to make it a little easier, we'll just talk about residential property right now. With residential property, there's about maybe 800,000 parcels of residential property in Cook County. And the City of Chicago is a huge part of that parcel count. So the reason why we split up the county into 3 different districts, the south suburbs, the north suburbs, and the City of Chicago, is because it's such a huge undertaking to come up with the values for those properties. So for the City of Chicago, we started in about April of this year with the first township, which was Rogers Park Township. And what we do is we look at the sales for different types of properties or different types of homes in that township. We look at the trends and see if those sales have either increased or decreased in value for those type of properties. We use what's called mass appraisal method of assessing, and we use regression analysis, a statistical basis, to come up with those values for those type of homes. Once we determine how much percentage increase or decrease we have in the values, then we send out notices to the taxpayers saying, this is the new value for your home, new assessed value, and we ask you to determine whether or not that assessed value is correct. The next step after all of the assessment process is over is the actual collection of tax dollars a year later. So the value that we place on property is then reflected a year later in the tax bill that the taxpayers receive.
Sent out by the treasurer.
By the treasurer. The county clerk sets the tax rate based on the values that we've placed on properties and the agency's request for dollars.
Now, the authority, the legal authority to do this, so I mean, this comes from the state,
yes.
Correct? And there is, my understanding, there's a formula that is used for the purposes of then figuring out ultimately what that assessed value is going to be, and then how it impacts the property tax thereafter.
Yes, there's a number of factors that are used. The first factor we look at in the assessor's office is the classification factor. So for residential property, this is the year where the taxpayers will see a difference. In the past, the assessment rate was 16% of market value. This year, for the first time, Assessor Houlihan went to the county board and asked them, let's make it a little clearer for the taxpayers to understand how their assessed value relates to the market value. So now the ratio that we use is 10% of market value.
And based on what?
Based on, first of all, we come with the market value of the property. We come up with that value. Then if you multiply that value times 10%, that will give you what the assessed value is. So over the past few years, we've noted that the ratio, instead of being 16%, was actually 10% for residential. So we had that change so that people would understand when they get that assessment notice, when it says, for example, that their assessment value is $20,000, then that means that that is 10% of what we're saying the market value is. So $200,000 would be the market value for that home.
Not
so,
$20,000.
Right. And in the past,
so people are probably confused and thinking, my gosh, what's going on? Why is there this huge disparity between what a real estate agent is saying my property's worth, or a private, someone who does property value assessments, and saying that this is worth a lot more money.
Exactly. The numbers we had before were our market value, the assessor's market value, but not the actual market value. So now people will be able to see the actual market value, and they'll be able to judge what that market value is in relation to what they're seeing properties in their area selling for. And then they'll be able to come to us and say, I think you have my property assessed too high, and compared to my neighbors and to the sales in the area, I think you should reduce my value, and therefore that their property tax burden, or the share of their property taxes, will be reduced.
Now, why is it done every 3 years?
It's done every 3 years because it's such a huge undertaking. We really would have found it difficult to do all properties every year, as other counties do. Other counties such as DuPage and Lake, they do it every year. They apply a factor, but they don't have the huge amount of parcels that we have. So that's why we have a 3-year lag in the values. However, this is the first year where we're actually, in a way, doing all of the county, reassessing all of the county again, because even the suburban areas are getting new notices now showing the reduction in values based on what's going on in the real estate market.
Now, right now you referenced the looking at comparative sales of other properties, and we just used residential as an example. How have you seen the impact on this recent downturn in the economy, with regards to, in particular, with regards to the residential development market? How has that impacted the analysis?
Well, it's caused us to rethink how we assess properties. In the past, we looked back further to look at sales trends. We looked back from 5 to 7 years. Because of what's going on in the market recently, this downturn, as you mentioned, we have been looking at more recent years to see what's going on in the market. We've also had to include foreclosure information in our analysis, where in the past we didn't have to do that. There weren't as many foreclosures as there are now. So we're working with other companies. We've contracted out to get more